Hello Math 6 students, this is Mr. Giomini. Kind of wanted to review or rehash lesson 4.2 today, comparing fractions. We talked about some different things, some different strategies to use. One of them was obviously looking at the denominators. If the denominators are common, it makes it a lot easier on us to compare fractions. So for instance, if I had 10 25ths and I was comparing that to, let's say, 11, or let's go with 12 25ths. I immediately identify that the denominators are the same, so I don't have to focus on them. I can look at the numerators, and we know that 12 is larger than 10, so that means 12 25ths will be larger than 10 25ths. We talked about that. We also talked about comparing with halves. So for instance, if I had, oops, get that out of the way here. If I had something like 4/7 and compared that to, let's go with 3/9. Okay, I know that half of 7 is 3.5. I know that half of 9 is 4.5. Well, now let's see. I have 4 here, which is greater than a half, because half of 7 is 3.5. Well, I have 4 that's greater than that. If I go over here, half of 9 is 4.5. Well, I have less than that. Here I have 3, so I know that this fraction would actually be 4/7 is greater than 3/9. Okay, so that's another way we could do it. We also looked at comparing it and trying to get it as close to one whole as we possibly could. So for instance, let me move this up here. We had something like 5/6 and compared that to, let's say, 1/4. Okay, I know fourths, so I take that same, let's just say that same pizza, and one I'm cutting into fourths, the other I'm cutting into 6. I know that the fourths will be larger than 6, but here I'm 1/6 away from being one whole. Here I'm 3/4 away from being whole. So this is much closer to being one whole than this is. So that would help me identify that 5/6 is greater than 1/4. We talked about using an equivalent for one of the fractions. So for instance, we had an example of something like 2/7 and 1/4. Well, let's see here. 2/7 and 1/4. I could do, let me erase this, what I have. So I have 2/7 and I'm comparing it to 1/4. Now this makes it a little tougher. Now I know 1/4, that's an easy one to convert, so I'll keep 2/7 the same, but I know 1/4 is the same as, I'm going to multiply, this goes back to the previous lesson, the numerator and denominator is the same, so that gives me actually 2/8. So now this is nice too, because I have my numerators are the same, so now I can really focus on the denominators. Well, if the denominator is 1/7, 1/8. Now we always get this confused because we think 8 and that's larger, but remember, if you have the same pizza and that same pizza is cut into 7 slices or cut into 8, you have the same area there, so that means the 8 slices actually be smaller, so each 1/8 is smaller than each 7th. So that helps me determine that if I have 2/7 or 2/8, the numerators are the same, but really having 2/7, because the denominator, this actually gives me larger pieces, this would be greater than 2/8. We also did finding a common denominator. So something along the lines of, we said, hey, what is 3/5 compared to 5/8? So we said, hey, we're going to compare 3/5 to 5/8. Now this one's a little tougher. I see that they're both greater than a half. I see neither's really close to being one whole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out, well, what are some common multiples they have? Let's find their least common multiple. So I'm going to start with the larger number. I'm going to start with 8. I'm going to list the multiples of 8. So the first multiple of 8 is 8. Nothing times 5 will give me 8. The next multiple is 16. I'll list a couple here. 24, 32, this right here, I know your multiplication facts, and 40. Okay, so nothing times 5. So these are all my multiples with 8. So all of these work for 8. All these will work to find this and make this an equivalent fraction. So I want to go here and find this common denominator for this one. Well, nothing times 5 will give me 8, so I'm going to cross out 8. Nothing times 5 will give me 16. Nothing times 5 will give me 24. Nothing times 5 will give me 32. Oh wait, something times 5 will give me 40. That's called 8. So I'm going to rewrite this down here. I'm going to go now 3/5. And what did I multiply 5 by to get 8? Or I'm sorry, 40. I multiplied it by 8. So whatever I do to the numerator, I must do to the denominator. So I'm going to multiply this by 8/8. That would give me 24/40. Now I'm going to do the same. I'm going to do the same for 5/8. I'm going to take 5/8, rewrite it down here. Now, what did I multiply 8 by, the denominator by, to get 40? Well, I multiplied by 5. So I'm going to multiply both numerator and denominator by 5. 5 times 5 is 25. 8 times 5 is 40. So now I could focus back in on the problem. My denominators are the same. Excellent. I could focus in on the numerators. 25 is larger than 24, so I have 24/40 is less than 25/40. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples here. And I'll pull this slide across here. So here we have 4/5 is equal to, less than, or greater than 2/2. Well, I know 2/2, 2 divided by 2 is 1 whole. This is 1 whole already. This is actually less than a whole because the numerator is less than the denominator. So I know that this is 4/5 is less than 2/2. I go with 1/8 is equal to, less than, or greater than 1/4. Well, I have the same pizza cut up into eighths and fourths. Which slices are going to be bigger? That same pizza cut up into, take it, look at, I have 4 slices here. I take that same pizza, cut it up into 8 slices. If I shade in 1 here, there's 1/4 that I have, there's 1/8 that I have. Well, that makes it a little more visual, so I could see that 1/4 is greater than 1/8, or I can say 1/8 is less than 1/4. We go here, 1/5 is equal to, less than, or greater than 1/2. Well, here's that 1/2, so that's like my nice benchmark. 1/5, well, 1 is not half of 5, it's actually less than 5, or it's less than a half. Half of 5 would be 2.5, or 2 5/10, so I know that 1/5 would be less than. I come here, I can use that same theory. 4/5 is equal to, less than, or greater than 1/2. Well, half of 5 is 2.5. Well, I have 4, which is greater than a half. I have 1/2 here, so that means 4/5 is greater than 1/2. Okay, I go to this. 4/5 is equal to, less than, or greater than 3/7. Well, I look at this one. Which one's closer to being 1 whole? 4/5 is 1/5 away from being 1 whole. 3/7 is 4/7 away from being 1 whole. So I'm going to go with 4/5 is greater than 3/7. Right now, you might want to pause the video. Try solving these numbers 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14. I'm going to answer them once you pause it here, and then you go back and check your work. All right, I wish you well. So hit pause now, and then once you get these done, hit play, see if you get them right.